Hey everybody, and welcome to the Dog Classroom podcasts. I'm Anne-Marie.
And I'm Amelia.
And we are still in our new location at Rogers TV. So you're seeing our set.
Yes.
Once again.
We also have a visitor.
Right, we have a visitor here as well. This is B, for some of you guys in classes know. This is probably what he'll be doing through the whole thing. We have another visitor lower here is Maui. So what I'm doing is just getting them used to the space for, we're hoping the next set of tapings that we do, we're gonna be doing more like live demos.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on that note, what we're going to talk about today is recall.
Recall. So coming when called.
Right.
Because I did have someone once ask me if I meant like memory. Like you could recall things.
Okay. If they remember it.
Yeah, I don't know how we would teach that, but we're going to be talking about a different kind of recall today. And it's one of the big reasons, I think, why people come to see us.
Like one of the top four.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think it depends on your lifestyle.
Right.
Right? Whether you're more focused on training recall when you first get your dog, whether being a puppy or if it's an adult dog. But I honestly think it depends on lifestyle. But then some people's lifestyle changes.
Yeah, that's true. I think everybody should practice recall just in case. Because things happen, like dogs get out the door, they jump out the car when you're somewhere,
yeah.
or whatever. I think it's important to have recall. I think some of us use it maybe more than others because we do a lot more off-leash.
Right. Yeah.
But I think, yeah, like you said, it's the lifestyle. It depends on how they want to use it and how often they want to use it. But I think we should all be teaching recall regardless.
Yeah, because I would say one of the main issues with people that comes up a lot of time, or then they decide to say come to for privates or something, is the dog gets out the front door. Yeah. And goes to tour the neighborhood. So the tricky thing is a lot of people think, well, I never walk my dog off leash, so I don't need recall.
Right.
Until
something happens.
They get out the door, and then it's a bit of a keep away game. So I think what we want to do is talk about today more like how to train it and start, and then almost develop it based on like what your needs are.
Okay, yeah, and I think like a lot of the time people are saying, oh, well, my dog doesn't come when called, but it's because they're not either training it properly or they're doing too much too soon. So
right.
Maybe we'll touch on some of those as well.
Yeah, absolutely, because, you know, environment has a huge implication on it, right?
Yeah.
So in classes, where we try to start with recall is literally just on a 6-foot leash.
Right, but we also back chain it a little bit. Right, gotcha.
Right, yes.
Okay,
true.
So what I'm saying with that is basically when we do a recall with our dogs, when we call our dogs and we want them to come to us, we want to be able to actually catch them.
Yes.
Right, so they don't just come in and take a treat and run away.
Yeah.
So we call it gotcha, which is basically just grabbing the collar or harness before we give the dog their reward.
So it's having a hold of the dog, because that's what I say in classes, is in order, as far as I'm concerned, in order to complete or have a successful recall, it's that you physically have a hold of your dog.
Right.
Because we know, you know, dogs that haven't been trained recall, and then you're starting at 2, 3, 4 years of age, you go to grab them, and then it's the keep away game, or they snatch the treat and run, and the owner's standing there a little bit defeated.
Yeah, so I always start with the gotcha, so the dog is really comfortable having me sort of reach toward them, having me grab them. If they're a little bit shy, I've done like the leash, so gotcha on the leash.
Yes.
And then, you know, you at least have a hold of them. But back chaining that, meaning teaching the end of the behavior first.
Yeah.
And then building on it.
Yeah.
So we start there, usually, and then what?
So we're starting the back chaining, the gotcha, getting used to the reaching. I like to start it on the 6-foot leash. So I encourage owners, instead of, you know, to get their dog's attention tugging on them, why not use their name?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? It's like
attention getter.
Attention getter. So what we're trying to do is associate their name with good things. So if we say their name, they look at us, they get paid. then eventually what we're encouraging them to do is come a little closer. The other thing is, let's stay with the beginning part of recall, is the best place to teach it or start it is in the house.
Yeah, I always like to teach it in the house because then you can manage the environment, you can control what distractions are there.
Yep.
And the dog is already comfortable in that space, working in that space because that's where they live. And I think it's really helpful for the dog to get it right over and over and over. So they get like the correct response, they get the yes, and they get the reward and all that stuff. And then they have all that practice under their belt of, oh, that was easy.
Right.
Right, so you can take it out. And
yeah, and you're definitely having the focus. So again, we're not saying in the house to like practice it for 20, 30 minutes.
No.
No, like what about 3 or 4 minutes?
Exactly.
Right, and then the other fun thing is, if you have kids or whatever, I encourage people to do it. I joke a little bit in saying, your neighbors can't see you hiding in the bathtub when you call your dog to come find you.
Yeah.
Right, but it's about playing a little bit of hide and seek, and the game and the fun part of it is actually finding and checking in with the owner, right?
So when I'm teaching recall or when I'm teaching my dog what that word means, basically, because people will just say to their dog, here, and then assume. The dog doesn't speak English, the dog doesn't know what that means. So I'm using the attention getter, I'm saying their name, and then I'm teaching them, what does here mean?
Right.
So once you have their attention, you want them to move towards you. Because for recall, you're not going to chase the dog.
Yeah.
Because what happens a lot of the time, if the dog does get out the door, if the dog does, want to play keep away in the backyard, which is another thing.
Right.
A lot of people have fenced backyards. They try to call the dog to come in from the yard to come into the house at the end of the night or before work or whatever. And the dog can't do it because they haven't practiced the recall.
Right.
So when we're doing the recall, it's not just, saying their name, getting their attention. You also want them to move toward you. So how do we work on teaching that?
So the idea with that is, like Amelia said, the main thing is we want the dog to learn to come towards us or follow us, so why not move away from the dog, right? So then we're adding another part of the game. So not only are they getting paid for us, grabbing their collar or coming towards into our space, but now part of the game is the dog chases the owner.
Yeah, because a lot of the time it turns into the opposite where the owner is chasing the dog.
Right.
And that can actually make things worse, especially if, they got loose and it's one of those situations.
Well, I try to tell people, unfortunately, the dog keeps running and the owner keeps chasing, and then the emotion from the owner, there's probably no way the dog's going to
That's the other
itself to
thing
get
that
caught.
when we're teaching recall, right, is say in a happy voice, I don't care how mad you are that your dog won't come into the house. But if you're mad, why would they come to you when they may experience a punishment or whatever for actually listening to your cue? Even though it seems counterproductive, I think, sometimes when we're upset because we're running late or whatever, we're trying to call the dog in, they still need to be rewarded for that.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, like recall, I call it an expensive behavior. So you need to pay high value treats for it. So if we're thinking of rewards in terms of like dollar amounts, I'm not going to give them a kibble. That's going to be like $1. Right. I'm going to give them some cheese. That's like giving me $100 bill if I listen to you.
Especially if you're calling them out of destructive environment. So we just mentioned about starting to teach it. So if you're having the issues in the front yard or the backyard, okay, let's start to teach it inside. Okay, so then if I was having issues of the dog playing keep away in the backyard, how would I transfer my training from inside to the backyard?
I would start it on leash as well.
Right.
Because the main thing is you want 100% success when you're teaching recall. Like you don't want them to make a mistake.
Right.
Because if they do, right, if they do make a mistake with recall, what is the consequence of that? If you're in a fenced yard, they're safe, but they're learning, I get to run around and make this a fun game.
Right.
Right? I get to stay outside.
And then who's chasing who?
Exactly.
Okay.
So when I'm doing it outside, I'm not giving them the whole yard and saying, okay, I'm going to start calling them and hope for the best. I'm going to keep them on the 6-foot leash. We're going to walk around a little bit, and I'm going to do recalls just with that short distance to make sure that they can handle it.
Right. And then the way to increase difficulty is then give them more distance. The tricky thing, what a lot of people do, and I've done a few consults and I'm saying, okay, so why are you here today? Okay, to practice recall. How have you started it? And unfortunately, a lot of people take them to a new area, take the leash off, and assume they're going to come back.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that's scary.
That is.
That's scary, right? You know, being in a city, we're on, you know, semi-rural, but there's still a lot of wildlife and so forth out there. So we just, you know, have to be careful of the environment as well. So the idea is start on your 6-foot leash, maybe go to a 10-foot. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, so I have a 10-foot leash that I use when I'm walking, like on the trail or whatever, with Stark if there's other dogs and stuff around.
Right.
So I'll use my 10-foot leash. I also have the 15-foot one, like the dollar store one for Nettie.
So what Amelia's saying is we want you guys to start getting the dog to listen, which is usually, I don't want to say easier, but is easier for the dog because you've been walking them on leash. Then you go to 10-foot, and then what we're reminding the dog or teaching them is just, oh, can you also please listen to me at 10 feet? Can you also please listen to me at 15 feet? Mm-hmm. Can you also please listen to me at 20?
Yeah.
And then we sort of go out there. But the one little thing we haven't mentioned too is we always make a point, when you come, you get paid, but guess what? You get to go back to the fun.
Yes, that's right. Another important thing, because especially when we have dogs who are playing with other dogs. So I have people tell me, we went to, you know, the dog park and my dog wouldn't come when called. We go to my friend's house and my dog's playing and they won't come to me. Yeah. So what we do when we're having our dogs play with others or even in classes is we're randomly doing like the gotcha, the grabbing the dog, and then letting them go again. Yeah. So that they're learning it's not the end of fun when you come toward me. I was just having this conversation actually with somebody about how their dog seems to know when they're going from the car out the trail, the dog recalls beautifully. As soon as they hit the end of the trail and they come back, the dog knows they're going to the car. Yeah. And the only reason that they've ever grabbed the dog to put them on leash on this walk is
because the fun ends.
Because the fun ends. I'm like, you can't do that. You have to actually go out on the way out, away from the car. Yeah. Recalls, gotchas, leash them up, let them off. Yeah. And practicing that it's not the end of the fun, because then it becomes, instead of you're catching them, you're giving them a treat as a reward, it becomes you're catching them, you're putting them on leash as a punishment. So you have just basically taught the dog, don't come to me. Yeah. Which is the opposite of what we want.
Which exactly is what's happening in the backyard, especially for dogs that really enjoy being outside, is the only time you're calling them is when they need to come in and the fun's going to end. So why not just randomly call them to the door, treat them, and go back out, and then they never know when the fun is going to end.
Yeah, and I've actually, what I've done with some dogs who have a long history of not listening at the back door, for example, just they go to the yard, they want to go out, they want to play, they don't want to come in the door, is number one, have them drag the long line in the yard. You're watching them, right? You're not going to let them get tangled on anything. You're watching them. They're dragging the long line in the yard. When you call them, you're not just letting them go and hoping for the best, right? You have that leash as a backup. Yes. So you can pick it up if you need to. You're calling them in the door, because that's the other place they struggle, is I will come right to the door. I'll grab your treat and I'll run. Right. I have them call inside the door. Okay. Grab them, treat them, send them back out. Right. And so you're adding different layers so that the dog will have success by having them drag the leash. Yeah. So that, they know, I'm out here, I have my freedom, whatever, but you have that backup so you can catch them if you need to. Yeah. And then also having them practice the scary part of that, which is coming into the door, because that usually means fun is over. Right. Come in the door, go back out. So when we're talking about training recall, we're talking all different scenarios, right? It's not just I taught my dog this word in class and now they know it and we're welcome to go off leash everywhere at all times. Yeah. Because that's where we see it start to fail. Yeah. Because as soon as they learn, I don't actually have to listen when you say that, I can just run away, then we end up, our 100% success rate goes down and down and down until we don't have a recall anymore. Okay. So let's back up for a second.
We just want to make it clear where we're going here. Okay, practiced inside of the house. Okay, a little bit of hide and seek. Backyard, we're practicing on leash, long line. Okay, then eventually Amelia's mentioning we can drop that long line.
Yep.
Okay, the bonus of having that is if we do need to get a hold of the dog, normally you can get within 10 feet, and what you do is gently step on it and wheel them in. From my experience, and Amelia's gonna say the same thing, is the dogs know when they can get caught. They actually feel that long line dragging, and they're more likely to play the game. So once you're having success and so forth in that backyard, what I want you to then do is practice it in the front yard. Yes, I'm gonna say to you guys, everybody's like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna let my dog off in the front yard. That's not what I'm saying. Is then I want you to pick the long line back up, and I want you to practice recalls in the front yard for if and when they get out that front door.
Yeah.
You've already trained it, and it doesn't turn into a panic situation. The dog's like, oh, right, we played this game the other day in the front yard. We come back and check in with mom. The idea is we want them to learn that the only time, we're not focusing or going at them or getting in their space is for fun to end. So again, it has to be that compromise. So what we're saying again is the other thing, what we're trying to express is I keep telling to people, train in the house, the backyard, the front yard, because you're adding traffic, you're adding people walking this time of year and stuff.
Yeah.
So what we're telling you guys to do is get a good basis, then slowly increase distraction.
Right, which is a whole other episode on its
Which
own.
is a whole other episode. But the problem with people, and this is what we're saying, is, they've been working recall, the dog listens pretty good on a 6-foot leash, they go out to a friend's camp, they take the dog off and the dog's gone. So set the dog up for success, and each new location, go back to square one, retrain it.
Exactly, and I think that is relevant to us too, because when we have our dogs off leash, they're used to being off leash. So the repetition, like if we were teaching sit, we would say sit, we would reward, and we would do that like 1,000 times in every different environment with every different distraction.
Right.
When we're practicing recall fully off leash, most dogs don't get the opportunity to have that repetition because it's a privilege that we get because of where we live.
Yeah.
But not everybody sort of has a dog that wants to go to the dog park and practice where they're allowed to be off leash, or they don't have that same lifestyle, which is where that comes in. Because if my dog has been off leash every single day, multiple times a day from the time they were a puppy, and I've rewarded every single time that they've checked in with me, every single time that they've recalled, my dog is probably going to come a little bit faster when I call them versus, hey, let's let this dog off leash and hope for the best. And this is their first time seeing wildlife and different sniffs and, being in a new location. And so getting that repetition in, not just in the house, not just in the backyard, but also making a point to go out and practice. Yeah. Because I find when we do, right, if we live in the city and we don't get a lot of off-leash time, we're trying to go out and let our dogs run and have fun. Yeah. And we don't want it to be a big training session. It doesn't have to be. We can just practice.
But it can also be, it can be a lot more safe if we want to give that dog a little extra space to run, why not go into a field and put them on a 10-foot line and walk and practice recall so they're running sort of twice as much as we're walking.
Exactly.
Right? But we're not overwhelming them. We're not overwhelming anything else in the environment, which we need to be aware of. Yep. Like a lot of people say to me, they go find some hydro line or some dirt road, but you never know. So we're just asking you to train it, have the confidence in different situations, and have your dog and you build the trust together. Yeah. In order to have that style of relationship.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to recall, because like we said at the beginning, that's why a lot of people come to us, is something happened. Yeah. And the dog didn't listen. Yeah. So having that practice and actually putting the time in is going to be really important for recall. They don't just know, and they're not just going to come to you because they love you.
Yes, here we go.
Yeah. That's another thing that I've heard is I want them to come to me because they want, they want me or they love me or whatever. it's not even about that, right?
Right.
It's just what's in the environment is really exciting, and we need to have a history that's more valuable than running off, basically. Which is tough when you don't have a lot of time to practice it.
Yeah, but again, when we're talking about, and we really try to encourage owners this way, when you talk about practicing or training, we're not asking you to go out for half an hour every single day and practice this. 3 to 4 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes here or there. It's just reminding the dog of the game. The other thing is we do have a lot of, we have changes in seasons here. So, some of us say walk more off leash in the winter time, and then we have to revisit the leash in the springtime, vice versa, right? Some people are out hiking more in spring, summer. We're asking you just to remind the dog. It never hurts to go back, because you know what? Honestly, if you go back to square one, you'll whip through it. Within a few minutes.
And it comes faster every time. Like,
comes fast, exactly.
They remember, oh, right, I listened to this recall word. This is what this means. Come closer to you, do the gotcha, give them a treat. And that's the thing that I think a lot of us are missing, is that we don't practice it, because it doesn't have to be our entire walk as this training session. It just has to be call them, every few minutes and get those repetitions in. Right. So if you take the time to train it, the few minutes at a time, when the situation happens where the leash breaks, the dog gets out the front door, or, again, you're on a walk and the dog pulls the leash, you're not so panicked because you've trained it. So the tricky thing is, like Amelia's saying, is a lot of people say that they only, I don't want to say come to us, but seem to be more, not interested, but seem to be more willing to do the work is when there was a whoops. Or something that happened. So the idea is do the training, because then when the situation happens, you're ready. So we actually said something about that on a previous episode. We said train for the situation, not in the situation. And I think that just applies to everything. That's, So why don't you do a little conclusion for us? Okay. So just trying to make sure we got all the points here. So what we are going to encourage you, and we start recall as young as puppy school. Immediately.
Okay, getting them to know their name.
Right. So you can get their attention.
High value. We're not, saying that the dog should just pay attention to us. We're encouraging them to pay attention to us. We're definitely getting the gotcha in, which means that we're just gently grabbing the collar so we can actually have a hold of the dog for safety purposes. Going to encourage you to allow the dog then to go back out and play. So we want a sort of back and forth idea. Definitely, you can practice recall on leash. It's a beautiful 6 foot, but before you're thinking about taking that leash off, don't forget about the 10, 15, and 20 foot training, because people just assume, again, that if the dog can do it on a 6 foot leash, the dog's going to do it when they're 20 feet away. The other thing you have to remember is the longer they're away from us and the more interested in the environment, okay, we sort of forgot about this one, is the less likely they are to come back.
Because they're invested in whatever they're doing.
So Maui was yip-yiping at a squirrel before you picked me up. So the thing is, I let him, get a little bit excited, but I didn't let him stand there for 5 minutes and bark at it, because he would be way more invested and harder to get his attention. So what I did is go a little closer, try to get his attention, and he was willing to leave it.
Awesome.
At that point. He got paid. Got paid for it. We are on a bit of a time crunch, so we didn't necessarily have a lot of time to, yell at the squirrel up the tree. So, the long line, I think, is a tool that is not used enough. But I think it's, sort of cool, because I've been talking to more people and they're telling me that they have the long lines. Just unfortunately, some of them aren't sure how to quite implement it. Right? But the thing is, and I know people, take them places and want them to be off leash, but it's, again, reminding about where they are. And I honestly think the long line is the best of both worlds.
It is.
You know,
they get freedom.
They get freedom. You're doing a little bit of training. It's a different style of walk.
Yeah.
Right? But they're safe.
Yeah.
They're safe. And it's about wheeling them in or calling them in and really getting them used to that, to eventually working up if you're going to camp, that sort of thing, to work up to taking off the leash, whether you're doing off-leash hiking. But think of that first. Don't just assume the dog will do well.
Yeah.
Sort of go through the process, work through it. And then, you know, what we say is have them drag the long line and then eventually make it shorter, and then you take it off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, we're setting the dog up for success. We're building that relationship. This can be done at any age.
Yeah.
I tell my puppy owners, though, start when they're puppy because they're less distracted by the environment.
Yeah, they more want to be with you.
Yeah. So it's definitely give it a go then. You know, me being semi-rural, I started off all my puppies on a long line at 8 weeks old. They were working through that. So depending upon your lifestyle, because some people's lifestyles have changed. But it's about the teaching component and not about assuming. And it's also about building that relationship of checking in, because when I go in the bush for a hike or a walk, I like to do it with my dogs.
Yes, my dogs aren't just like we let them go and then they take off.
Yeah.
And they're, 500 feet away.
Yeah.
They're close enough, and then they check in with us every so often.
Yeah, and then, the joke is do a little bit of parkour, do some spins, hang out, but it's something that I spend time doing. I'm doing all my trick training while we're walking in the bush anyway. So we just wanted to remind everybody that component. You can definitely teach your dog recall with the long lines, with the treats. Other methods don't necessarily work better. For me, this is the best method.
Yeah.
You're teaching and you're working together.
Awesome. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see everybody next time on the Dog Classroom Podcast.
Thank you.